Sorry, I'm late. I want to be. I'm actually, well, I don't want to say I was totally ready earlier because I don't even have my shoes on, but I would have been shaking. And I say that word and I feel it at the verge, but you guys know I was in the hospital with her yesterday, the whole day. He wouldn't take me back for a bit. He wouldn't answer his phone to take me back home. And my car, which they take him to call in the car, which makes me really sad because well, anyway, they let her out today. Actually, yesterday I gave him $350. He took me to the bank to get cash for him. She said I shouldn't have given it to him. I said, am I supposed to give this to you? And he said yes. She said he's not responsible, and she said he's probably at the casino. So I had to wait a while for him to eventually respond to her to take me home and come there. And so then they want more money today. She came in and she needed 3 antibiotics and a probiotic, but also she's gonna get wound care, not at their house, which would mean, she's gonna have my car. And again, they don't call it my car anymore, and in fact, she got a call in the hospital, and the guy there that knows him called it his car, meaning her boyfriend's car. Needs to have his car, yeah. It made me really sad. I think, people take for granted, that I'm a woman and I'm completely alone. But I think just things in general, like if you say like, "Oh, why did you nice to that person?" Like, well, because I'm a woman and I'm afraid, or why didn't you do this because I'm a woman and I'm afraid, or what? Like, and it's like, why won't you get into an altercation? I'm a woman and I'm afraid, and I'm also alone, and I'm also only one person. To be outnumbered and to be outnumbered by people that have other people means it's a fight you can't actually win. You only The best course is to not even fight because you can't win it. Um, it makes me sad, but it also feels like it's the inevitable thing in my life. I tried to make not happen, but I never could make it not happen. So anyway, um, yeah, I mean things continue to get worse for me, but a servant to servants, that's a poem. Do you know who wrote it? You should do yourself a favor and read it. I'd love to know what you think it means. You could tell me. Um, then you figure out why I made it my title. Nothing to do with the book, actually. The chapter we began tonight is chapter 14. It's about as big far we are. Bowie does beatnik. Why does roadblocks keep happening still? Um, I mean, I was born into dire poverty and abusive situation. I've never met my own father. I was homeless at 18. I I I mean, see, this is what let me put my shoes on. This is what I push back on is like people try to say that I should just be an inspiration of like how much horrors a person can take. When really I think the meaning people should derive from my life in many ways is that people need support and what happens when they don't have it. I'm sure you appreciate yours, but like, your family and I think that that's a wonderful thing, but, I thought for a second, "Did I put on the wrong shoe?" Um, I think having any modicum of, like, power in this world is very important, and I feel like I'm an example of somebody that doesn't have that, and, your power is your protection, and so I have no protection. Um, I'm sad, but, sorry, I would have shared earlier what was happening, but people won't watch me if they know, like, if I communicate that I'm having trouble throughout the day, they won't even watch my show, and then they'll be like, "Oh, I didn't know you'd be on." So, otherwise, I would have said, but also, no, I have shorts on under the dress, so I did a lot of cleaning today. Yesterday, I started, but, the day with the cleaning, but then she's asked me to go there at the hospital. Make the suggestion that you get your yeah, see, that's the interesting, it's a conundrum because I do feel like it's been suggested that technically, if you ask for it back, you don't get it back. It's theft. It's something being held against your, you know, but and that you could call the police. Um I don't want that, for a lot of obvious reasons of like, I don't want it to be any trouble. I don't want to be like I could say, well, maybe they would say, well, okay, well then why don't I call the police on your dog and see what happens? But I'm not saying that that would for sure happen. I would like to think that it wouldn't, but I don't know the man that well. Um, and I know enough to be scared. So, um, they're taking advantage of you. Yeah, yeah. The thing is, like, when you're completely alone, people take advantage because, oh, thank you, Jerry. Because it's just like a matter of time, because you have no one. So I'm very glad that you're not in my position and, you have people. But since I don't have anyone, this is just kind of like how life works, like, I got really scared today. Like I was cleaning, and I got just kind of sick. And like my heart was hurting, my stomach got nauseous. I laid down and I try to focus on, like I'm still here. And even though it's just like a lot of suffering, I feel like I'm here just for mostly suffering, but then there are moments that are good. So like, I can't have people in here right now because the stuff in that room, like it's on the ground and I should clean it. Like, um, so if I open the door, like she would get on stuff. I wish she was in here. But that'd be one moment that I like is, getting to play with my dog. And when I came home, Fiona was so So happy to see me yesterday. And I was happy to see her. So yeah, so things like that, um, made me feel, well, grateful that, I didn't get too sick, today, so, and I'm here and I'm grateful for that. Reading to you, which I always enjoy, and I should have over an hour, and I love you, so. Mm. Okay, these are like blue, like a navy. Yeah. Mm. Okay. Hey guys, I see you. By the summer of 1999, Beatnik's office building was already near its capacity. It was sometimes hard to get a parking space in the garage, and Lorraine suggested she and I reserve a couple of spaces near the elevator with our names painted on the tarmac. The last available cubicles were in the vault in the basement. Lorraine decided to offer them to a small startup run by a guy named Tony Fidel. Tony had a strong background in handheld devices, and since leaving Philips, he'd been doing paid consulting work for Beatnik. He was working on a digital jukebox, but his startup was running out of money. Unlikely as it seemed that Apple would want to weigh into the digital music fray at this late stage, Steve Jobs loved the idea of an Apple branded music player, and so it came to be that Tony's prototype evolved into the Apple iPod, and he joined Apple and became the prime architect of the iTunes music service. The music industry was a shambles following the drastic drop in CD sales during the 1990s and the widespread sharing of illegal MP3 files. The record labels had gone into a panic. First, they tried to sue Napster and put the site out of business. Then they targeted individual music fans, their own customers. Finally, with a mob of litigators behind them, a consortium of major labels bought Napster out from under Sean Parker's nose and tried to launch their own music service. It was an utter failure. They spent 2 years squabbling among themselves and with their own artists. I remember too well how EMI Records got into disputes with many of the major acts on their roster. EMI couldn't resist dipping its own hand into the tech cookie jar. They made a handy $50 million profit in 6 months by flipping the stock they demanded from a small tech startup prior to its IPO. How much of that licensing revenue was credited back to bands like Queen and Pink Floyd and Duran Duran, whose music EMI had farmed out? Zero, because that sort of revenue was never defined in the contracts we'd all signed decades earlier. The labels had tentatively licensed small parts of their catalogs to tech startups like Liquid Audio and eMusic, but they were overly cautious about larger companies, reluctant to give away their power. So nothing could get done. The simple fact was With the pressing plants and fleets of trucks taken out of the equation, there was no real reason for record companies to exist. They had no divine right to position themselves as musical tastemakers who would determine what the public got to hear. They were becoming little more than a roadblock between music fans and new music. What the labels did have to fall back on was their long term control of legacy catalogs. Their best and only weapon in the digital music wars were the binding agreements with the likes of Madonna and U2, the Rolling Stones, and Bon Jovi. Their lawsuits against tech companies and music fans mostly ended in a stalemate, and their own efforts at digital music platforms were a flop. So by the time Apple came along and proposed a service that would link iPod users to the slick web based iTunes storefront, requiring an all out license to each of the majors' entire catalogs, they met little resistance. Apple was the white knight. They had none of the sinister overtones of a Microsoft, nor the risk associated with early stage startups. Here, said the labels, take it all. We're too beat up. Yet the history books will record that Steve Jobs single handedly revolutionized the music industry. In the future, school children will be taught that Jobs was the innovator, the early bird, the fearless pioneer who recognized the precise moment when music was ready to go virtual and that the internet was the place to buy it. In reality, he was several years late to the party. I hope one day the iPod's true visionary will get his due recognition. Maybe then they will stick up a plaque on the side of Beatnik's old building on El Camino Real, proclaiming in 1999 the iPod was invented here by Anthony Michael Fidel. No, he did not invent the iPod. I mean, yeah, Apple did have massive money and team of highly advanced engineers, but also it's like, okay, a music player. No, I mean there were CD players, cassette players, um, handheld radios. Like, okay, I remember when I read to you the Steve Jobs biography. Yeah, he had a great interest in music. He dated Joan Baez for quite a long time. He was a weird guy. He went to was it in India and got all into the weird his hippie shit where he like tried to cure his cancer with vegetables and because it was very much into this type of uh music and culture. Um, Give me a break. Tony Fidel's iPod prototype was probably the only thing of real value to come out of our building. Well, see, that's why you're holding on to that. It wasn't an iPod prototype. During that period, it was right there under my nose, and I myself was oblivious until the day he and his group moved out and went to work for Apple. Day to day life at Beatnik was a frantic rush to create a real business or at least to ally ourselves with companies who already had one. We had struck up a relationship with a small San Francisco outfit called Mixman, a group of DJs, musicians, and designers with a cool office near Chinatown. They made a plastic hardware console that a little a, looked a little like a scaled down version of a DJ mixer and twin turntables. The parts didn't actually move, but you could load it up with a multi-track song files and make your own mixes of songs by a variety of top artists. Just, it's interesting with music that it's like, so, like the whole concept of a single, right? Like you put out a song somewhat like for free, right? On the radio, like as sort of an advertisement for your records, but also, your shows, like things that you can sell a profit from. Um, oh, thank you, Rob. I think is that a radio? Um, and so, so you put your songs on the radio, but usually I don't think you release like a whole album. In part, I think they wouldn't do that because, like, do you ever remember, like, before you could just get it all online, the interest in an album, like, oh, this song is good. I wonder if the rest of the album is good or more songs I would like, and then I would enjoy playing it over and over, and that would give me a lot of um good times, enjoyment. But then maybe the rest of it you don't really like, but there was like the single. I'm just saying it's very interesting because if they didn't release some of it, then people wouldn't actually know to like buy the record outside of the cover looks interesting. Like you if you didn't hear part of it, like then you wouldn't know. And I think it's like with a movie, how much you give away of like a trailer or spoilers or because having that helps often, not always, sometimes just word of mouth a little or, like not totally releasing very much, but again, it's that line. And I think it's also like with like online, um, because I don't like this argument. I feel like he's trying to make an argument for allowing theft of anyone. Um, because I think there's a point where it's like, no. And again, like, or at least if you're profiting off of stealing someone else's work, then the theft of that, um, to enhance, your own life, your own business, whatever, I think is a moral issue. So again, I equate that very much with like people that steal people's TikToks and just be like, huh, oh my God, look at this stupid, horrible bitch right here that bought too many perfumes. This is so wrong. Anyway, watch me profit from this. This is so wrong. And I continue to make money off it. This is so wrong. And I'm so glad they did this because I can make more money. Like, you know what I mean? Like, um, they're saying that, but ultimately, like, you're using someone else for your own benefit. And I feel like this is what he's promoting anyway. But anyway, it was an interesting thought I was having earlier. Like I heard like a movie trailer, and actually maybe you guys can tell me there's a movie with um being advertised right now with, oh, what's his name? Okay, so help me with this. He's a wrestler, I think, or a former wrestler, like, and he was in Guardians of the Galaxy movies. Yeah, buying that CD. Yeah. Um, it's who is he? I keep wanting to say Jason Momoa. I don't think he was ever a wrestler. Anyway, um, Dave Batista. Thank you. So there's a movie right now, Dave Batista, and um, the trailer keeps playing in commercials, and in the trailer they play very like loudly, when it's over. there's like blowing up and things behind, but that's so much quieter than the sound of Pat Bennett's heart. It's like, I don't know if the name of the song, but is it like "We Belong to the Night"? Do I have "We Belong to"? Anyway, and I was wondering to myself, like, I start singing along, in the commercials, and it's like so pretty, and I'm like, but do I like this because I've heard this on the radio so much before, or other films before? I mean, obviously, if it was the first time hearing, I think I would still like it. But what I mean is it in this commercial in reference to the other times people heard it? And so essentially having it out there like this promotes, the song. And actually she still tours. I'm trying to wonder, is she the one that's married to the tennis player? Is she still married to McEnroe? Anyway. Mm. If she didn't let them play the song, and you don't hear the song, um, because I mean, I'm sure that if she get licensed it for a fee. I'm looking something up. No, is it he married Patty Smith? Right? Hmm. Patty Smith. Maybe I got it confused. Anyway, she does still tour. So if she kept all the music to herself, never allowed it for a commercial, never allowed for something like that, and you never heard it, then you might not go and see her on tour? Mm. Ugh. Where was I? Mm. The Mixed Man. Wait, hold on. Okay. They made a plastic hardware console that looked a little like a scaled down version of a DJ mixer and twin turntables. The parts didn't actually move, but you could load it up with multi track song files and make your own mixes of songs by a variety of top artists. The Mixman box was on sale in a number of retail chains, including Circuit City and Walmart, and it was targeted at teenage males and tweens. In a way, the product was the hardware equivalent of our own e-mixes. But unlike Beatnik, Mixman actually had some revenues. In their best quarters, they turned a small profit, a feat that was practically unheard of in the web software sector. Beatnik's board was getting impatient with our lack of solid revenue stream, and they were envious of Mixman's apparent success. One of our directors, Alan Morgan, who represented our largest VC investor, Mayfield Fund, had the bright idea that if we could merge with Mixman, we'd combine the fizz of an internet startup with a plausible revenue stream. And this might be enough for the combined company to file for an initial public offering on the NASDAQ. While I was not a big fan of the Mixman product, Ian Powell was clearly very keen for this merger to take place. In fact, insisted Ian, the Mixman merger is the only way this company will survive. I wondered how on earth he planned to consolidate our two very different brands and types of customer. Mixman was all about consumer toy sales, whereas thanks to Ian's recent efforts, Beatnik was making inroads into the corporate ad agency world. And what sort of logistical challenges would Lorraine face? A merger would mean 25 reluctant San Franciscan hipsters commuting down to our uncool San Mateo bank building every day with their tattoos and piercings. And we'd have to find new job titles for them. I could sense the mixed man guys weren't really into it either, but they recognized, as we did, that it was probably the best chance any of us had to make some money during the dot-com gold rush. Well, that's interesting because I thought you didn't care about that. Really? Didn't you say that? My head began to spin, all these irons in the fire, and no clear sense of direction. We pressed ahead with the merger plans, and tension rose. While the contracts neared completion, the rest of the company was on a tight deadline. Ian was masterminding a major release party and product debut at the annual National Association of Broadcasters show in Las Vegas. We were announcing a suite of products that would enable music libraries and sound effect companies to license their music on the web via a Beatnik powered interface and e commerce engine. And see, that's the thing. That's the thing. Uh, uh, I have no idea. Okay. They're looking for, how do I say this? Okay. So I think that uh ultimately most smaller companies, they want to get bought. Um Ultimately, I think. Um and why someone would buy them for any like worthwhile amounts is gonna be like if you have something that they can't like make themselves, get themselves for like less money, or they, yeah. So for instance, like trademarks. So that's why like you're talking about having the library, having the catalog. That has a value because you can't just like duplicate it, um the rights to it, um if there are contracts. So you have to stick to that and base um any other contracts off of the ownership of the originals. Okay, so um it sounds like his company is like trying and trying to have like something that's theirs only, that's original, like, and he's upset that it seems like they never got like bought out or bought like in the gold rush, because others kept having something better or something like, and it's sort of like, oh well, it could have been or almost, and if it was, um so for instance, even now, right, like people I think will invest, and it's smart, like in a company or something, a person, like if they have something that others can't compete with it. Often it's going to be they have a lot of money, or they have like an ownership to a certain software or something that's theirs. Or so like with like a company like an Apple, like um they have a lot of money. Um and you can't like just have that. Like, well, I can compete with them. No, you can't. And if they can make this, like, no, you can't. You're hoping they can maybe get bought, but um and so I feel here he's like upset that he's like, well, I was there. I I was there. Shouldn't I be entitled to something? Because like I could like see things, but we're like other people, right? Like I was cool, and like why didn't I get like I'm on the same level of like these people? Like I was in the room, and these are the pants I was wearing. Like um, I mean, it's got to be shitty to um. Well, I don't know. I was gonna say, well, it's got to be shitty to people that you were right. Well, I don't think it was ever like around them anyway. Like Mary Ellison, whatever. And see them get wildly more successful than you. But isn't that like? I mean, I don't know. I mean, it's got to be really shitty for like some person in a third world country without access to clean water to look at this guy too. Like you could say that about a lot of things in the cruel unfairness of life, sure, but I mean, of all things, this and the Backstreet Boys stole from me. Like, sorry, okay. We pressed ahead with the murder plans and tensions arose. No, you read that. Okay, here we go. In times of crisis, I'd always put my faith in talent and creativity. You should put it in people that have the power and have the money. So, mm, uh, while the oh wait, hold on. I had the idea to approach two highly regarded audio industry figures to help spearhead the Vegas launch. The movie composer Hans Zimmer, a fellow Fairlight user I'd known since my London days, and the Lucasfilm's Oscar-winning sound designer Gary Rydstrom. The plan was for me to conduct an armchair interview with the two of them on stage and discuss Beatnik's new products while showing off our demos on a giant screen. A small theater at the MGM Grand Hotel was booked for a private party, and the guest list was to be made up of top industry professionals. Hans Zimmer and Gary Rydstrom agreed to take part for free as a favor to me, so I was quite surprised when Lorraine told me the marketing department's budget for Beatnik's Vegas party was over $85,000. I called Ian Powell from a payphone at SFO to ask why it was costing so much. Well, there is the theater rental, the catering, and the band, he replied. There's a band? I asked. Oh, I meant to tell you, we booked Don Henley from the Eagles, but he's doing it really cheap. How cheap? Only $60K plus expenses, replied Ian. I was flabbergasted. Why hadn't Ian asked me first? I have nothing against the Eagles per se. Used to like them quite a lot back in the early 70s, actually, but surely I should have a say in what rock music act we chose to associate with the Beatnik brand. What sort of statement did it make that we were booking a middle aged country rock star for our company party? What? The Eagles are still like the biggest band. Like, what are you talking about? What? What? I'm sorry, but you wish that you were the Eagles. I mean, I don't know. Like, people love them. I don't know. They couldn't get going. uh, why not one of the cool current pop or hip hop acts we were targeting with our e-mixes? Oh my god. And you remember the early commercials and like for the iPod, he wanted the Beatles. He wanted them desperately. Got the Beatles, Bob Dylan. They're going back like you too, but like Ugh. I tried to stay calm, explaining that I needed to be consulted before he made a decision like that. I felt the music business was my domain. But Ian cut me off, and he sounded pretty hot under the collar. Look, I won't go into my reasons now. I have to get to a meeting. Gotta run. Then he hung up. My next call was to Bamandara, Ian's second in command. Bauman said he was sure Ian had thought very carefully about the choice of handling for the party. I should not worry. He'd known Ian for many years and was constantly amazed how he always seemed to make the right choices. A few minutes later, I got an email from Ian on my Blackberry. I'd be grateful if you didn't talk to my team directly. They are busy preparing for Vegas and they need to stay focused. In future, please put everything through me. That night, I barely slept. In fact, I was sleeping less and less. I was away on business trips a couple times a week and working long hours at the office. Often, after a full workday, I couldn't face going straight home and plunging into domestic life with paper bills to open and three small kids so eager to play with me. So I would stop off at a local Italian restaurant and have a couple of cocktails at the bar, chatting to the restaurateur, Pete. One night, I confessed to him that I thought beatnik was starting to affect my sanity, and I told him about my little problem with the VP of marketing. That's why I never put my own name on my restaurants, Pete said. See, most restaurants will go down the tube sooner or later. It's only a matter of time. You should never confuse your business with your own sense of self. Otherwise, when the business goes in the shitter, that's where your ego ends up too. Pete wandered off to tend to a table. As his words sank in, I caught sight of myself in the mirror behind the bar. I looked tired, frail, old. I hadn't been windsurfing in months, and I was putting on weight. I couldn't remember the last time I fired up a synthesizer or written a song, and here I was hiding out in a bar, afraid to be at work, to face my own employees, and afraid to go home because I knew I couldn't be the dad my family needed. I thanked Pete for his sage words, then downed the dregs of my whiskey sour. I sat for a while in our driveway with the engine off, and I thought of Jim Clark in his darkened office at Healthion, playing with his executive toys. He'd had the good sense to remove himself from his proud creation before the rot started to set in. He must have realized that Netscape's trajectory was set early on in the game, and there was little more he could do to affect its success or failure. When Netscape ultimately failed, selling itself off to the by now irrelevant AOL after suffering years of assault and battery from Microsoft, Jim was probably relaxing on the deck of his mega yacht in some Mediterranean harbor. Now, Beatnik Inc. was hurtling perilously towards its IPO, with or without me. It was time to start building my escape pod. But unlike Jim Clark, I was still dependent on my monthly salary. I had a mortgage to pay off and three kids still in school. I decided I needed to occupy myself with some portion of the business where I could stay insulated from Ian and Lorraine and the belligerent Mixman employees. Once Beatnik became a public company, I would be locked in for at least a couple of years. That was beginning to seem like a jail sentence. In private, I confessed to Joe Rizzi that I was not sure I could go through with it. I was weighing the idea of getting out before my name got printed on the S1. How strong is your desire for liquidity? He asked me. because the board might agree to let you sell your shares privately for a few cents on the dollar. Liquidity, what a concept. I was feeling more and more that the company I founded was nothing but vaporware. To survive this, I had to return to solid matter, find a way to ground myself. In a fog, I flew to Las Vegas and arrived in time for Ian's big product launch party at the MGM Grand. The drinks and hors d'oeuvres were flowing, and my onstage interview with Hans Zimmer and Gary Rydstrom went over well to a packed house. I could see Ian at the back by the bar, schmoozing his VIP ad agency guests. The time came for me to introduce the Don Henley Band. As I stepped to the center of the stage and looked along the line of Henley's musicians, I spotted a familiar face. My former backing vocalist from Lost Toy People, Laura Creamer, whom I hadn't seen since the late 80s. I winked at her and she gave a little wave. Don Henley played a slick 1 hour set. He sounded great and looked very dapper with his blow-dried hair and light tan suit. I waited a few minutes at the end of the show, then headed backstage. In the wings, I bumped into Don. I introduced myself and complimented him on his set, thanking him for coming to play at our company party. And I said I knew Laura and was she around. He motioned me up a staircase toward the green room, but when I got there, it was deserted aside from a lone janitor sweeping up. Where's the band? I said. Oh, John and his band came straight off stage and into a limo out in the back, he said. I think they're catching a plane back to LA tonight. Well, that can't be right. I just saw Don downstairs in the wings, I exclaimed. Christ, did that weirdo get in again? Said the janitor. We had to kick him out during the sound check. He's a stalker. He follows the band everywhere, dressed exactly like Don. I better call casino security. What? Well, uh, sometimes I felt like a con artist myself, walking around Silicon Valley dressed exactly like Thomas Dolby. Beatnik's board concluded several meetings with investment bankers to pick the firm that would take us public on the NASDAQ. At length, we selected Robertson Stevens, or rather, Robertson Stevens selected us. All over Silicon Valley, hopeful software companies were lining up for their IPOs. The S1 form required by the Securities and Exchange Commission required an extensive analysis of our company's business prospects and a competitive risk assessment. I helped Lorraine Harrington write the corporate summary. I had to admit, as we listed our accomplishments and the deals we had concluded, I felt pretty good about what we had achieved. There was no need to overhype anything. Admittedly, our revenues were sparse, and in our 5 year existence, we'd only ever had 2 profitable quarters. But the public was hungry for new tech investments, and compared to many of the wacky companies that were completing successful IPOs at the time, on paper, Beatnik looked like a reasonably good bet. What we could not disclose, though, was the warring that was going on behind closed doors. Many employees were getting bitchy in their quest for more elevated titles to print on their business cards. With promotion came an increase in stock options, and one day soon, these would be worth a lot of money. In a company with 102 employees, there were a dozen with the title of vice president or better. Lorraine Harrington's office door opened and closed with a constant flow of traffic as she played nursemaid and therapist to members of her senior staff. She had to listen to a torrent of suggestions and complaints from disgruntled employees, rumors began to circulate in the corridors. Cryptic emails would make their way around the company, accidentally, quotes, CC'd to key personnel. An anonymous posting showed up on a site called fuckedcompany.com, purporting to be from a beatnik employee, decrying our wasteful overspending on parties and press releases, and calling the company just another get-rich-quick scam by its founder. It sounds like that Glassdoor website. Ian Powell was Beatnik's third largest employee shareholder, and though he'd been at the company for under a year, the IPO would make him a multimillionaire. Yet every time he closed a deal, he would take Lorraine or me aside and complain about his compensation. He loved to remind me that he'd taken a major wage cut when he moved from Apple, and that given the value he was adding to the company, he should be rewarded with more stock and his vesting period should be accelerated. I just sidestepped these demands. I'd fib that I was late for a recording session or that I had to leave early to go to my step aerobics class over at 24-Hour Fitness. I told him I was trying to eat better and get in shape for the upcoming pre-IPO publicity tour. God, I hate that place, Ian said. People always come up to me and say, how did you get that muscle and that muscle? I'd never noticed before how when Ian clenched his jaw, the veins throbbed in his temples. At the Beatnik board meeting, Ian proudly presented his latest campaign, Bowie Does Beatnik. He'd persuaded David Bowie's management to adopt our technology for Bowie.net, his state-of-the-art fan site. Ian projected a giant image of the proposed full page-and-a-half ads. This was the first time Beatnik had invested in print advertising, and he explained that it was the logical next step in establishing our brand. The budget for the initial ad buy was $30,000, and the entire campaign was to cost us more than $75,000. Ian, in his persuasive style, was all hyperbole. The board members were clearly impressed, but one or two voiced some concerns. Alan Morgan commented that magazines and newspapers seemed a little old hat. The bigger problem for me was the photo Ian proposed to use in the ads. It was by far the ugliest picture of David Bowie I'd ever seen. He looked old and haggard, and definitely underwhelmed by the product he was promoting. I worried that when the magazines hit the newsstands, this would be the main talking point. Did we really want people to associate the Beatnik brand with a sad, past-it rock star? Oh my God! Oh my God, he's so, hateful and jealous, especially of the people that he has to or feels he has to pay. Yeah. I mean, I think I've heard of that, about companies begrudging influencers or people they pay to advertise their crap or whatever. You're not worth it, but what, like yourself? Said Ian. He immediately laughed too loudly, as if to make light of his quip. What are you talking about? You're the one that just insulted David Bowie. He just compared you to him. What's the word? How horrible for you to say that. Yeah. There was a ripple of uncomfortable throat clearing around the room before Lorraine thanked Ian for his presentation and said we'd now proceed to other business. Before I go, I'd just like to say what an honor it is to work with you guys and how optimistic I am about Beatnik's success. said Ian as he stood up. And I wonder if you would give some further thought to my request for an increase in my compensation. I've set out the key points here. At that point, he produced from his briefcase a one-page memo, duplicates of what he slid across the conference table to each of the external board members. Ian left and Alan read out the memo. It called for a $20,000 per year pay rise and an increase in Ian's original stock options by 440,000 shares. This seemed an arbitrary number until I remembered that at the last count, it was the precise number of beatnik shares I was due to vest myself during that period. Where had Ian come up with that number? The only people that knew the details of our share allocations were Lorraine and me, the board, and our director of human resources. In any case, the board was not thrilled. Lorraine, are you happy with Ian's work? Asked Joe Rizzi. Well, yes, he's doing an amazing job, said Lorraine. I just wish he'd tell me about his plans before he commits money to them. Marketing accounted for over 1/3 of our expenditure in the last quarter. Joe looked thoughtful. A few thousand shares here or there is not going to change our lifestyle. Why don't you tell Ian we will revisit his comp situation in Q2 after the IPO quiet period? But Lorraine, you have to make it contingent on him falling in line with the priorities you and Thomas set for him, injected Dampy. We can't have Ian blowing through this company's cash for his own pet marketing schemes. That Friday, we threw a big party at a nightclub in San Francisco to celebrate our IPO filing. I stood in the line at the bar behind Robertson Stephens investment banker chap on his tall blonde trophy wife and couldn't help eavesdropping. And what do these ones do? She asked him, shouting over the DJ's thumping trance beat. They do music, darling, I told you, he said. Music on the internet, like those ones the other week in Redwood City. In the run-up to New Year's Eve 1999, Wall Street was getting nervous about what was well known as the Y2K bug. Banned by the media, there was a widespread panic that computers and networks would grind to a halt at the stroke of midnight on December 31st because their clocks were not programmed to deal with years that didn't start with the number 19. Yet in Silicon Valley, the race was on to see who could dream up the most elaborate millennium party. Chris Anderson invited 100 of his closest friends to the ski resort of Whistler, British Columbia, and asked me to play for his guests. It was the first concert I'd done in many years, and it felt wonderful to get back to music. So effortless, so relaxing. Afterwards, we all took the ski lift up to a mountaintop restaurant that Chris had booked privately for the evening. Out on the deck with a mug of mulled wine, Kathleen and I gazed at the Milky Way through a large telescope. The night sky was unpolluted and magnificent, and under the canopy of stars, we talked about what we would do with all the money. We could get hold of an atlas, I joked, and pick out our island in the Caribbean. Can it be in the Hebrides instead? Kathleen said. Sure, why not? In a decade or two, they'll be calling it the Scottish Riviera. The IRS will get most of the money for starters, she reflected, so the government can build more aircraft carriers. Can't we give some of it away ourselves instead? We decided to set up a revocable trust fund, distributing over half of our 2.5 million shares among our closest family and friends, as well as a number of Kathleen's favorite charities. Not only would this save a fortune in taxes, it would mean that those closest to us would be able to cash in their shares right after the IPO, whereas as a director of the company, I would have a fiduciary responsibility to maintain my stake at a high level for several years to come. The tax man would get his dues, but we'd still have enough left over to retire and live comfortably for the rest of our lives. Most of all, I love the idea of being able to make my music without any outside pressure. For the first few months of the year 2000, I had butterflies in my stomach. I decided to keep my head down and leave the money matters to the experts. So I concentrated on my new obsession, making music for mobile phones. Every time I traveled to Europe or Asia, I saw that those cultures were far ahead of the USA in their adoption of mobile technology. Tamagotchis on every street corner in Copenhagen. I gotta say Copenhagen, sorry. And Singapore, there was a teenager thumbing text messages into her cell phone. In Silicon Valley, they had no idea. It was not a pedestrian culture. Everyone drove a car. I had a computer waiting for them at home and another at work. Venture capitalists were focused on the PC and the gray corporate world they called the enterprise. They didn't consider young people as a driving force for the economy. Their sense of pop culture came from observing their own teenage kids who attended private school in Atherton and got a Jeep as a 16th birthday present. So this gave me something to get my teeth into, something that would keep me from out from under the feet of Lorraine and Ian and the board and the investment bankers. I saw it as vital that Beatnik re-educate itself, beginning with a small group, then the whole company. I put together a task force of the 10 people most likely to understand and adjust to the mobile world, and we named our little stealth project Valhalla after the Viking heaven. We met twice weekly, almost in secret, so as not to distract the rest of the employees until after the IPO. Following the public announcement of our IPO, Beatnik suddenly had a lot of new friends. In March 2000, the board decided to open up a mezzanine round of investment. This was mainly for strategic partners and individuals who we believed could bring something more to the table. Among the investors were MTV Networks, SoftBank, the Asian-backed VC fund, Kevin Wall, a top rock festival promoter, and Timothy Draper from the prominent investment firm Draper Fisher Jurvetson. Lorraine Harrington did a marvelous job of pushing the investors to put pen to paper before our IPO window closed. On top of the new cash infusion, our IPO might raise 100 million more. I was aghast when I thought about the numbers. It seemed like something out of an Oliver Stone movie, with me in the Tom Cruise role. They were going to put me on the front cover of Fortune magazine, seated on a throne. The mezzanine round brought in an astonishing $34 million of new cash. We put it in the bank. The very next day, Wall Street crashed, and Beatnik's IPO went up in smoke. Chapter 15, Dark Fiber. Forearm network. We had a poker game on Thursday nights in Mark Gross's garage in Burlingame. 5 or 6 guys joking around, kicking back. We'd order a pizza, drink some beers, and a malt whiskey or two, smoke a joint. I was never that great at cards, but I found it enjoyably distracting. You couldn't win or lose more than a couple $100 in a night. Mostly the money just moved around the table. It was fascinating to look at our group of regulars and consider how each player's poker style matched their attitude to business and to life. Mark Gross himself was a shrewd and conservative player. Dealt anything but the best starting hand, he would fold right away. He was happy to sit out the rest of the hand and observe. He would crack jokes, but you could tell he was watching closely. It was all a learning process. He would invariably finish up with a big pile of chips at the end of the night. He parachuted out of a career at Imagine.com early on and invented a brilliant way for parents to keep track of their kids' homework called School Loop. It's been implemented in thousands of public schools in over 30 states. Howard Bulka was a top San Francisco chef. He played cards for the fun of it and for the companionship, enjoying a surprise turn or a bad beat, even when it was at his own expense. He later turned his back on haute cuisine and opened Howie's Artisan Pizza in Palo Alto. And very good it is, too. Rob Reed was an enthusiastic and attentive player. He calculated the odds and bet the percentages. He sold his music streaming company, Rhapsody, to Real Networks the week before Apple announced iTunes and married a beautiful TV presenter. He recently published his first sci fi novel. Bobby Levin was on the cautious side, a self employed media consultant. He preferred it when the stakes were low. He would back off the moment the pot got too big to count. He rarely ended the evening a big winner, but he kept his losses manageable and had a great night out. Stuart Ilian made some smart moves. He would wait till he sensed he had the right hand, then back it to the hill and make a killing. He had a rough time at exum.com when the tech homesteading balloon began to deflate, but his heart was never in it, so he switched to a business he loved, aviation. He left San Francisco before the height of the IPO mayhem and bought a jet charter company at a small airfield in Southern California. When it was Chris Anderson's turn to deal, he would invent new games. He enjoyed the complexity of shifting probabilities and loved the thrill of a big pot. He always stayed in for the most exciting hands, where often his sheer self-belief paid off. He would get on a roll and win several hands, running as though I saw him, or running as a big pile of chips stacked up in front of him. On more than one occasion, I saw him stick around too long and end up doing the walk of shame to the nearest ATM. But Chris could afford it. He had built two massive publishing empires before the dot-com crash robbed him of a large part of his net worth. He put a big chunk of what he had left into his beloved TED conference, and over the next 15 years, he built his third global empire, one that will be treasured and remembered far longer than his magazine endeavors. You know, I find it a bit strange. Like, would you describe your entire group of like friends or whatever based on what they do for work? And certainly the most key um financial valued, components of their job history, like that's how you describe. I mean, I'm sure if their friends were women, it would all describe them by how they looked. This person was an unattractive this, the whatever color their hair, and this person the size of their bra. But like, I just find that like these are your friends, and that's what you say. Okay. Why am I bothering to record this in such detail? Because there's an odd saying in poker, if you don't know who the sucker is you. Oh, wait, what does that have to do? After Beatnik withdrew its IPO in April 2000, I tumbled into a deep depression. My already sleepless nights were spent tossing and turning in a cold sweat. I lost interest in sailing, bicycling, reading, and sex. I lost interest in music. I didn't want to face my friends. I had no energy to play with the kids. And increasingly, I needed to stop off at one of the local bars before heading home in the evenings. First thing the next morning, I'd hit Starbucks for a couple of chocolate croissants and a triple cappuccino. Halfway through my cappuccino, I needed a cappuccino. It took me a while to accept that I had to seek help. Eventually, Kathleen persuaded me to see a psychiatrist who said I was suffering from anxiety and depression and put me on Prozac. I spent a night in the sleep lab at Sanford Hospital, and they diagnosed me with chronic sleep apnea. The specialist was surprised I had been able to hold down a marriage or a job. He recommended maxillofacial surgery to ease the pressure on my windpipe, but warned me that it could put my singing voice at risk. I took a deep breath and booked a date for the complicated procedure at SFSU Hospital, knowing that there might be no way back. Round about that time, a brown padded envelope arrived in the mail. I glanced at the English stamps and watermark, and just looking at it made me feel homesick. I recognized the handwriting from years earlier. It was from Patty McAloon of Prefab, and inside was a cassette tape along with a 9-page letter. He wrote that the tape contained a home demo of a new solo composition called I Troll the Megahertz that he wanted me to produce. It was a single track, nearly 23 minutes in duration. This time I was longing to hear it, but I needed to pick the right moment when I had some peace and quiet. That moment arrived a few mornings later when I got in my car and joined the slow commuter traffic of the early rush hour on Highway 92 and popped in the cassette. The piece began with a plaintive orchestral figure played on high strings and xylophone. Broad cellos and violas swelled in underneath with that familiar sense of longing that all of Patty's chords evoke in me. Then a solitary female voice, an actress speaking a narrative. I am telling myself the story of my life, stranger than song or fiction. We'd start with the joyful mysteries. Before the appearance of ether, trying to capture the elusive, the farm where the crippled horses heel, the woods where autumn is reversed, and the longing for bliss in the arms of some beloved from the past. I said, Your daddy loves you. I said, Your daddy loves you very much. He just doesn't want to live with us anymore. From I Troll the Megahertz, Patty McAloon, 2003. This is why you shouldn't do drugs, kids. The farm where the crippled horses heal? What are you talking about? By the time it got to the crippled horses, I was already in floods of tears. I had to pull over on the gravel shoulder with a line of angry commuters honking at me. I rolled to a stop in front of a boarded up flower stall, restarted the tape, and buried my head in my hands. I stayed like that for the whole 23 minutes and for a while after. I felt that it was my name, my brand that had failed. I felt bad for the employees, guilty about the shareholders, embarrassed that the shares I'd gifted to my family and friends would now be worthless. I kicked myself to think that I could have gotten out with the approval of the boardroom. I probably could have resigned from Beatnik during the year before the planned IPO by selling my stake privately to one of the many greedy would-be investors, but despite my reservations about what we were doing, I hung in there. It wasn't even about the money. It was about the chance to score a massive hit versus the risk of looking the fool by cashing out too early. And I knew that I'd put it all ahead of my health and my family and risked missing out on being a proper father to my children. Lorraine was a good friend. She tried to console me with numbers and facts. Beatnik still had over 37 million in the bank, she reminded me, and although our annual revenues were only 1.5 million, they were getting ever closer to matching our outgoings. Perhaps it was a blessing in disguise that we could now focus on developing a real business without the scrutiny of public shareholders and the SEC. She said about reorganizing the company and looking for ways to trim our costs, maximize our runway, and give us a cushion to reach profitability. I've never been great at tidying up behind myself, so I left Lorraine to it. Cash or no cash, I was convinced Beatnik was on its way to joining the long list of .com also rans. I went to wander the corridors, hoping I'd have a brainwave that would rescue my company from the brink of oblivion. It was sometimes soothing to hang out with the Beatnik engineers. They had a pragmatic approach to work problems, and although, like all of us, they all kept long office hours, their culture allowed them to take breaks and play video games, hang out at the water cooler, stage Nerf ball fights or ping pong tournaments, and then return to the whiteboard to solve some programming puzzle or other. I remember one morning, this was prior to our non IPO and my ensuing nervous crisis, I was perched on the side of the desk in Muir's cubicle. He was twanging on his guitar. I noticed a pile of fading faxes and email printouts, and I started thumbing through them. I stopped at one from a certain David Williams at Nokia. It was 2 months old and gathering dust. What did Nokia want? I asked Chris. Oh, yeah, that was from a few weeks back. They had some questions about the BAE. They're looking for a synth to put on their phones to play ringtones. I read the fax through. Geez, did you answer this? I said. Nokia, based in Finland, was the biggest mobile phone company in the world with a greater than 30% market share. I think so, but I never heard back from the guy. For fuck's sake, Chris, I said. There was a phone number for a David Williams on the email with a UK prefix. It was already 7 p.m. in England, but I headed to my office to give it a try. To my relief, Williams answered in person. It's good you called. We're considering putting a sound chip in our phones, he said. We've had simple ringtones for some time now, but some of these latest Japanese phones have got a Yamaha MIDI chip in them, and they're playing proper music. I'd rather not have to license a chip if we can do it on our own CPU. There are some pretty good software synths like Propellerhead, but they use too many cycles. We've had a look at your synth running in Java, and it seems pretty efficient. We'd be interested to see if you can get it working on one of our handsets. Muir and I set a date for David Williams to stop off in San Francisco on his way to Tokyo, where he was going to meet with Roland, who was offering a software alternative to Yamaha's chip. If it turned into a beauty contest between us and Roland, Muir said, we stood a good chance of winning. Beatnik had been designed from the ground up to have the smallest possible footprint for quick web downloads and to be efficient enough to run on even the puniest processors. He reckoned he could get a stripped down version of the BAE running on an old IBM 286 motherboard from the 1980s, which was roughly equivalent in power to the current
Nokia mass market handsets. When David Williams arrived on the date of the meeting, we surprised him with a demo playing through the tiny speaker of a hacked Nokia handset. He said it already sounded as good as or better than the Japanese alternative, and he would recommend to his company that they enter into a proof of concept phase with us as a prelude to a possible licensing deal. I used Valhalla to ease myself back into the swing of things. My semi weekly workshop was up to 15 people now, intently studying the emerging mobile market. We'd entered into an initial agreement with Nokia, and a couple of the engineers had jury rigged a prototype phone so we could transmit content wirelessly to it. This was counter to FCC regulations governing the radio spectrum, so we kept the apparatus down in the bank vault. It all felt a little subversive. We made an experimental web page that would allow users to select a tune from one of a library of custom ringtones and send it remotely to their phone number. If BAE were to become the audio engine embedded in every new Nokia handset, the Valhalla Group speculated there had to be ways we could gain an unfair advantage. We began to map out a blue sky business plan that would wedge us in between the handset manufacturers, wireless carriers like Sprint and AT&T, and music producers. At weekly Wednesday morning general meetings, I would present Valhalla's latest finding to the rest of the company, showing slides and demos in an effort to accelerate our collective understanding of the mobile marketplace. So I was pretty shocked when, at the start of one of Wednesday morning meetings, Ian Powell stood up and announced that he just returned from Chicago, where he'd concluded a co-marketing deal with Motorola, the largest U.S. manufacturer of mobile phones and devices. Had Lorraine known about this? And if so, why hadn't I been told? As it turned out, she was also in the dark as I was. The deal Ian had agreed with Motorola apparently involved a commitment from Beatnik for technology, content, and work for hire, which Muir estimated would require an initial investment on our part of $40,000. After the meeting, I went right to Ian's office and interrupted him in mid-discussion with two of his cohorts. They both stayed to witness what happened next. I told Ian it was completely unacceptable for him to go out and make deals like this behind Lorraine's and my back. Quite aside from the fact we had to be more thrifty now that IPO was abandoned, it was crucial that we all be united in our efforts to get Beatnik's business on track. As Ian knew, the mobile market was where I was now focusing all my energy, along with the 15 participants in my Valhalla group. He knew we'd begun discussions with Nokia. We had plenty of valuable data to provide Ian in his approaches to companies like Motorola. That was the whole point, but it had to be a coordinated effort, and what he had done might have torpedoed the overall strategy. As I told Ian this, I could see the blood start to pulse in his temples. For an instant, he seemed to swell in size, like a bull toad preparing to strike out at a fly. I can't live like that, he blurted out. I can't work under a microscope. You don't understand. There's a way of doing things, and then there's the Ian Powell way. So fuck you, Thomas. You can stuff your company up your arse. I turned and walked out, and Ian slammed the door behind me. It stayed shut for the rest of the afternoon. I passed him in the corridor once or twice over the next few days, but we made no eye contact. Nothing came in writing either. He seemed determined to carry on as if his outburst had never happened. See, I don't understand this. Okay, so he had this meeting, would require initial investment on our part, but they didn't do it. And he also knew about Motorola, because often I think people do that where they're like sometimes even lie, like, "Oh, well, I have this other offer, though, that I'm considering," or "There's this Motorola's interested," like, to get the other one to be like, "Oh, I should offer more," or "I should sign a deal sooner, there's other interest," like, 'cause it sounds like that's probably could have been what he was doing. Um, and so, yeah, he didn't know. I don't get it. Nothing came in writing. Okay. At the quarterly board meeting, Lorraine relayed the story of Ian's unauthorized trip to Motorola, and I told them about our subsequent confrontation. She said Ian had asked her once again that morning to bring up the question of his pay raise and stock options. Joe Rizzi spoke up. Lorraine, I want you to send for 2 security guards and frog march Ian out of the building right now. Lorraine laughed, but it was plain to see Joe was dead serious. Vampy just nodded gravely, without a word. Lorraine stood up and went to tell Ian to clear out his desk. By the time the board meeting was concluded, Ian Powell was gone. He was offered a severance package that included a non-compete agreement. A week later, I was at a tech conference in Camden, Maine, and standing at a payphone beside the harbor when Lorraine told me the news that Ian had signed the severance agreement and was out of my life for good. Oh, I punched the sky. I danced around on the cobblestones among the stacks of lobster pots like a drunken sailor. Not only did Ian flout the non-compete agreement, he also poached away several of the more dewy-eyed beatnik employees and formed a consulting company, hawking his services to most of Beatnik's customers in the process. But I wasn't bothered. Sure, you're so unbothered. Life is too short to worry about people like Ian Powell. The final extravagance of the Ian era was a party in New York City to celebrate our partnership with David Bowie. Bowie wanted to do a free private gig for subscribers to his website with his movie director's son, Duncan, filming it for posterity. Ian had agreed that Beatnik would sponsor the show. Bowie booked the Roseland Ballroom, a modest venue with a standing audience capacity of 1,200 and a nice balcony for VIP tables. I had barely seen Bowie since Live Aid, not even during our work on his website project, and it felt good to reconnect with a piece of my past. He had his whole backing band with him this time, including superstar session players Earl Slick, Carlos Alomar, and Gail Ann Dorsey. Bowie had to skip the sound check due to a severe cold, but sent me a personal message via his assistant asking if I'd like to join him on stage at the end for a couple of numbers, provided he had the energy to come back for an encore. I was immediately flattered, but he was sick and I wasn't holding my breath. Why were you flattered? Didn't you just say he was like an aging has-been that you and you were insulted to be compared to him? Showtime came around and Bowie managed to rip through a 2-hour set of nonstop classic hits. I was seated with Kathleen and some of my in-laws at a table on the balcony. At the end of the set, the Roseland crowd went wild. They weren't going to let him go without an encore. Bowie returned to the stage and, shading his eyes, he pointed at me and beckoned. I grabbed a portable keyboard and rushed up on stage in time to jam my way through Let's Dance and Ziggy Stardust. And then we played Heroes, which of course I remembered from that incredible afternoon at Wembley Stadium 15 years earlier. I grinned out at the sea of happy fans in the semi-darkness. Many waving the green screens of their mobile phones. It was just the jolt of adrenaline I needed. I never said what kind of poker player I am. To me, it was always about the epic win. It wasn't just enough to pull down a big pot or wow people with a straight flush. It had to be a statement, a work of art that, that I would stick in the that would stick in the mind for years to come. I would wait all night for the perfect opportunity. Sometimes several games would go by in Mark's garage. I'd lose a little each week, and the perfect opportunity would never arise, which is why I remember this one hand. The game was 7 card stud, nothing wild. I had 2 cards face down and a 5 showing. The bet was to me, and I passed. Rob Reed had an ace up, and he raised to the max. When I matched his bet, the 4 other players looked at me quizzically. I could see Rob making a mental note that I maybe had another 5 down, possibly 3 to a straight or a flush. Surely not a strong hidden pair or trips, or I would have bet initially. 3 more players stayed in. After 6 cards had been dealt, I was showing 3 5s and a king, and still banging it to the max. Everybody dropped out except Rob, who was showing 3 10s and an ace. Still, I kept banging my hand. What makes you think I haven't got another 10 under here or a pair? Said Rob, studying my face. And he pushed in his maximum raise. You better not have 4 5s, you bastard. I smiled and re-raised him. He saw me. The dealer dealt us the final down card. We both peaked. I bet the limit, and Rob raised. I don't think you've got a boat, I said, and I reckon all the 10s are gone. I threw in the maximum raise. Rob kept going, re-raising me. I glanced at the pot and matched his final bet. There had to be $150 in the middle of the table now. Rob turned over his cards with a grin. 4 10s. I turned over mine. 4 kings. When I got home that evening, there was a FedEx package waiting for me, and I knew what was inside. It contained a brand new Nokia 3510i, the first ever mass market Nokia phone with my beatnik synth embedded in it. Nokia's first manufacturing run of this model was 35 million units. Okay, that's the end of chapter 15. We'll end it there for the night. We did 2 chapters. Okay, this is all we got left. What do you bet? He only remembers winning that because it's the only hand of poker he's ever won in his life. Like, of course he remembered that. He remembered every win, the one. So I have to pee. All right. Oh, as my life comes back to me. Yeah. But we'll be done with this one soon. I'll pick a new story next and like escape into that and not think about the horrors of my own life. I love you. I see you tomorrow. You sleep well.